Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We're all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Ayuck? We're keeping that one in. All right, everybody.
It's funnier every time.
If you couldn't tell from that noise, we are doing a Goofy movie today, and we're starting it out appropriately, which is laughing our asses off. All right, y'all. So we're talking about beloved 90s Disney classic, A Goofy Movie. Today we're going to be talking about parenting styles and parenting a teenager specifically. If you've never seen a Goofy movie, I'm going to assume you were not a child in the 90s. But it is about Goofy Goof, I assume is his Christian name.
I think that's the only thing
Goof.
I think it's the only thing we can go by, truly.
So
I mean, he's got high hopes, you guys. So
he's got something. But so Goofy and his son Max Goof, Maximilian Goof, they are in a tumultuous time in which Max Goof is becoming a teenager, and he is sort of rejecting his dad and wanting to be his own person. And then because of that, Goofy tries to take him on a family vacation, just the two of them, to reconnect. And like a typical 90s movie, shenanigans ensue involving a pop star, a hot girl named Roxanne, and two members of another family, Pete and Peach. So with that, let's jump into it. So parenting styles. So what do we mean when we say parenting styles?
we mean that there are a couple set ways that you can choose to interact with the teen as a dominant communication style, which an interaction style, which some people choose one or the other, and it can be quite the cesspool of discussions between friends, family members, intergenerational communication styles, and the lovely place called the internet, where a great deal of parent and mom shaming takes place.
Yeah. Where everyone
Especially
thinks
moms
that everyone thinks they know exactly the right way to parent. And it's usually in direct opposition to how they were parented, if I had to make any bets.
Yeah.
Or in direct mimicry of it.
Yes, true. So there are four main known parenting styles within psychology. So there's authoritative, authoritarian. I hate that those two sound so similar. It's so confusing.
Know.
And then there is permissive and neglectful. So when we open up in this movie, and we'll kind of talk about the different styles as we go, but as we open up with this movie, would you consider Goofy's parenting style to be a bit permissive? Because I think permissive is the parent that kind of goes along with whatever the kids do, very just like laissez-faire, you know, kids make the rules, and the parents kind of just follow suit and don't really enact punishment, anything like that. We don't get a ton about the parenting style in the beginning, but that was kind of the flavor I was getting.
I don't think we have enough information, honestly. I think based by Max's behavior, he does seem to fear authority, but he also seems to think he can do whatever he wants. So I think it's likely that Goofy leaned more towards the permissive side, especially because we see the way Max reacts to when Goofy switches on him, which usually works super great, by the way, to just switch a parenting style with no warning. But I think it's fair that Goofy was a more permissive type parent. I think that's probably accurate, but I don't think we get enough information to say for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like he definitely leans towards permissive, but it's really hard to tell because we don't get a really good view of it in that like 10 seconds before he goes to school or a couple minutes before he goes to school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think what I noticed that made me even just use this as an example as we're talking about parenting styles is when Goofy comes into his bedroom in the very beginning of the movie and he's very like, can you please clean up your clothes? You know, I've kind of told you a few times. I really appreciate you. Want me to drive you to school? And Max is pretty rude, like very like dismissive and rude. He doesn't seem to feel swayed by Goofy's expectations. It seems like he just kind of railroads past Goofy. Granted, he is in a hurry to do his hijack of the school assembly.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like he has he's not worried about Goofy in an authoritative way.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, Max is pretty preoccupied throughout the whole film with his own agenda. So, you know, inferential reasoning would say, at least in this small window of time, it seems likely he has a permissive parent.
Yeah. Which I think is also not atypical of single parentdom. You know, I think what we do know about Goofy is that he's a single dad. Like we were talking about before that we started recording. There is neither hind nor hair, nor mention, nor photo, nor tear running down the cheek reference to Max's mother, if she even exists. I don't know how that works in Toon World. Maybe she just came to be. Max just came to be. But so we have no idea like how long Goofy's been parenting by himself, if it's a newer thing, if it's an older thing, if it's been Max's whole life, you know. Because where I'm going with that is that would be interesting to me help with the parenting style part of it, because if it's just been the two of them, you know, I think that also can create a more permissive parent just because we talked about this in other episodes. It can create more like a peer-to-peer kind of energy at home instead of a parent-child dynamic, which can kind of organically create more permissiveness. Not necessarily because anyone's being a bad parent. I think that can just be like an organic evolution, especially as kids get older.
Yeah, and it can be, you can have more diffuse boundaries because of enmeshment, because they're literally each other's whole world. And you can see Goofy is doing a lot of doting on Max and taking care of him, and even admits later in the movie that he's kind of having trouble with him growing up and not needing him to do all of those things anymore, that he's got his own life. And Goofy obviously takes Max on a road trip that Goofy might have done at a vastly different age.
Yeah.
Than he took Max on.
Yeah.
A vastly different age, or with a total misunderstanding of who Max is. Because I think also something we noticed, I guess I inferred right away, is that Goofy and his father seem to have a lot more in common than Max and Goofy. And it seemed like Goofy was having a hard time recognizing that his relationship with his dad, Grandpa Goofy, can be different than Max's relationship to him.
Yep. And also the thing that all parents seem to forget, which is hard because we try to teach our children to survive the world we understand. But I know I've mentioned this before, but there's a Hebrew proverb I found doing some research for an article I wrote that said, don't confine your children to your own learning, for they're of a different time. Which I think is really powerful for adults to remember. And this movie highlights really well, which, you know, Goofy is seeing this like Possum Pals thing that probably was the peak of awesomeness in 1962.
Yeah. Those animatronics were really popping.
Which, you know, I appreciated the meta humor of Disney making fun of themselves here. But, you know, the animatronics would have been like the peak of technology then. And then for Max, it's like, wow, this is bad. And also, I'm not 6. but parents have to adjust to like the idea of just because like this was the coolest thing ever when you were young does not mean it is still the coolest thing ever. I think that's, I'm going to be biased here in musical taste, but I think that's why there has been very limited Guitar Hero development for a long time, because the boomer generation did nothing but like try to introduce and indoctrinate us into their music, and nobody could ever be better than that. And I wonder how many people got discouraged and did their own thing, like circuit bending and learning to make digital music and EDM and all kinds of things that boomers couldn't do. And then we have very, very few guitar heroes in our generation compared to what they had. Kind of skipped a generation. Like there's some Zoomers who are picking up guitars and doing some wild shit with 8-stringers and creating a whole new sound and style. But when parents fail to realize that your generation's thing and time come and go, they fail to connect with where their kid is at. And like you're saying, who is Max? Goofy doesn't know at all.
Yeah. And I think because of that, then it allows the situation where Max gets in trouble at school, right? And Goofy panics, he panics that that Max is going down a wrong road. And I think that also says a lot about maybe how much he's really paying attention to Max as his own person, as like an autonomous person, that he's so easily shaken by this seems to be a blip of an incident, with Max's reputation. I mean, I'm making kind of an assumption, but Max didn't strike me as a kid that gets in like repeated trouble, where like the principal knows his name kind of kid. He's not like a Marty McFly, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. He doesn't seem like, it seems like this thing that he did was really like, it's a romantic gesture in some ways is really what it was. And so it doesn't seem like he's the kid who's in the principal's office all the time.
No, I doubt it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think he could. It didn't seem like there was familiarity with him in the office. They all looked pretty perturbed to be there.
Yeah, and also
Pauly Shore, because he's just Pauly Shore. Anytime he shows up, he's Pauly Shore.
Yeah, and also with how anxious PJ was to do it, felt more like kids who don't really break the rules that often.
No,
I mean, we'll talk about PJ in a minute, and also probably why he was so anxious. But I think what we see happen with Goofy as a parent is not atypical to what I've seen when I've worked with parents of adolescents, where they can have a more permissive kind of like hands-off parenting style, which sometimes works. Like if a kid's like a pretty good kid just on their own, like you don't really have to be on them too much. And then something happens, and then the parents become anxious about how they're parenting and what kind of adult they're growing into the world. And then they try to like rapidly switch tactics, and it makes a mess of a lot of stuff. Because one thing you said, Ben, earlier is that it does not do well to unexpectedly swing the pendulum parenting style and then think it's going to fly, for a number of reasons. One, the kid's going to be confused about where the hell this parent is coming from, right? They're going to either like naturally I was going to say they're going to submit, but I don't really see that very often. Usually what I would see is the kids buck, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Why are you doing this to me? Like why am I supposed to listen to you now when things were used to be okay before? And honestly, when I would do that work with families, I would not necessarily take the kid's side, but I had to do a lot of work with the family of like, your kid's not wrong for having this response to you. You've changed the rules to the game halfway through. And then you're pissed that the kid's just not like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll listen to everything you say now.
Yeah, the kid's not just going to go along with it.
No,
just because you decided to change your mind.
No, and it's like it's missing out on the fundamentals of behaviorism. Human beings are animals, and they have set behaviors, and there is a set phenomenon. It's known as an extinction spike.
Mm-hmm.
When you chart out the frequencies of behaviors and then try to make an intervention, the second you make an intervention, the behavior you're trying to change is going to buck back against you and increase to try to get you who are making an intervention to stop making that intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time you set a rule on a kid, they're going to test you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that with Max immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you do something that's radically different. Like one of the things that you always hear people talk about that will go to hypnosis seminars for cigarettes, or people that are about to go into rehab facilities for alcohol. You know what they're going to do the day before they go in? They're going to drink a shit ton. Yeah, they're going to get high. They're going to get fucked up, and they're going to drink a lot.
They have to get well before they get sick, as they say.
Right. And then at hypnosis seminars that people go to for quitting smoking, which I don't know how popular those are anymore, but they were in the 90s when this movie was made, so it's relevant, right?
Sure.
People would go, like, before they started, the hypnotist would tell people, okay, all of you, you're going to go out and you're going to smoke your last cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Which was actually part of the programming, because they'd go smoke like 6 of them and be all fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
Feel
Not
sick.
so good. Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a natural behavior you can work with to build an association with feeling sick and smoking.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand that when you change a behavior, when you radically shift and try to put a hard stop to something, the first thing that's going to happen is that extinction spike. The behavior and things to get you to change are going to increase rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what we see in Goofy too is, like, he's feeling anxious. He's starting to parent out of anxiety. And then he unfortunately goes towards a source for parenting advice that is a poor source for parenting advice, which is Pete. Big old Pete. And so Pete parents in what we would call an authoritarian style, which is that very, like, almost like military-esque. I am the grown up, you are the kid, I am the boss. Like in Matilda, that whole speech where it's like, I am big, you are little, I am smart, you are stupid.
Right.
It's that very, kids are to be seen and not heard. It is better to be respected than loved, but respect, it's not really respect so much as it's like scared of
Fear.
And submitted to, not really respect, in my opinion. And Pete even says that he keeps using the phrase under your thumb. The most important thing a kid can be is under your thumb to Goofy. And if that's not like the motto of authoritarian parenting, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Is like, that is, it's almost like, and you see how he treats PJ. It's basically he wants a little servant, who's scared of him, who listens to him, who does what he says. And that's it. Like, there's no trying to understand PJ as a person to make him feel loved and secured. There's no love and affection between them. It's all authority, 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 which is that's a more old school way of parenting. That when I work with parents, especially when I worked with grandparents who were taking over parenting, I would have to ease them out of that style, of like, this approach is not going to do what you think it's going to do.
Yeah.
If we really want to think about what are the goals of your relationship with your child. Because could it have worked eventually? Yeah, but it would have been at the total sacrifice of Goofy's relationship with Max, which you can tell that Goofy didn't want.
Yeah.
Nope. No, he did.
He really wanted a way to continue to have the same kind of relationship with his son, but just help him. But he just felt disconnected to him. And he was trying to figure out how to be connected to him. And so he did the only thing that I think that may be the only thing his parent did to connect to him, which is take him on a vacation.
What's so funny about that is it seems like who he kept reflecting to, which is his father, Goofy Sr. I don't know what his name was, but like, didn't seem like an authoritarian parent. So it is interesting. I think that's where I said, like, I feel like that's where it's Goofy's anxiety coming out of like,
Mhm.
I'm doubting myself
Yeah.
as a parent. Because I also think what's hard about him being a single parent too is like he doesn't have a partner to balance off of, to check in with, to talk through, to debrief with about like, oh shit, this thing happened with Max today at the school. How do we want to approach it? Do we want to go hard on him? Do we want to ground him? Do we want to try to talk to him and understand what's happening? Do we need to switch our parenting tactic up? What would that look like? You know, he just has a vacuum.
Right.
And so he has no one to bounce these ideas off of.
Mm-hmm.
And also no one to affirm him too. Because also if he had a partner and not Pete, who's demeaning him, Pete's bullying him. Pete is like the Biff of this movie, just like a total
absolutely.
bully asshole. And so of course he's not going to build Goofy up. He's going to immediately tear Goofy down and, you know, and tell him, yeah, of course you're probably a shit parent. Of course you're probably raising a future convict. Like, and so Goofy doesn't have anyone telling him, well, you're doing a good job. There's some things maybe we could tighten up on, but overall, we've raised a good kid. We're good parents. We're very loving. Like he doesn't have a partner who is building him up. And that's what's really hard about being a single parent is you're just like in your own head, in your own house, especially if you don't have good like family friend supports. Like you really are doing your actual best as a parent and hoping that that is correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And
which he doesn't know. And Goofy, you know, flat out says he doesn't really have friends. He never needed them or something to that effect. And that means that he's largely keeping his own counsel and doing his best based on his parental learning.
Yeah. And his only friend is who has through work, which is Pete, who we've already said sucks.
And seems to be his boss.
And seems to be his boss, yeah. And then his dad, Goofy's dad, who he, like you're right, he's trying to follow the template of that style of parenting to put a Band-Aid on the current situation with him and Max.
Right. But then listening to Pete because he has nobody else to listen to that he respects. So he listens to Pete, and Pete scares the hell out of him because the one thing that Goofy's afraid of more than anything else is
Pete
losing Max.
Oh,
losing Max.
yes, you're right. And then when he looks at Max and he sees him in the little like prison getup.
Right.
Yeah. He's really, because then he'd be really alone. I mean, I think.
Well, and Pete told him like he'd die in the electric chair. I was like, good God, where were we in the 90s?
Yeah, and he brought that up later too. Goofy does say too, I don't want him to die in an electric chair or something like that.
Right. And I was like thinking about that because I have a Ride the Lightning t-shirt and a band named Ride the Lightning. And Ava was looking at the back of that shirt, which has a dude in an electric chair getting shocked. He's like, Daddy, is that a skeleton? I'm like, uh-huh. I go, why is there electricity? I was like, ooh, topics we're not going to explain to a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Dark.
Which is good parenting on your part, Ben.
Yes.
Yep. Like, yes, baby girl, it's a skeleton and lightning. That's it.
And it's really hard when I work with parents. It's really hard to get them out of parenting, out of anxiety when something's happened. It's really hard for them to even notice that they're parenting out of anxiety or that they're doing reassurance seeking through a change in their parenting style. And ideally when they come to someone like me or Hannah or Ben, even like, because I know you don't do parent coaching like I've done and Hannah's probably done. It's like
sometimes I do. Part
of what you do is you just reassure them and try to like name the anxiety for them and piece apart like what is the anxiety coming into the front seat and leading how you're interacting with your kid and what is actual like solid parenting. Because what Goofy's trying to get to, and I think he does get there, is authoritative parenting, which is the A+ like primo parenting. That's the parenting you want to get to, which is that middle ground of having expectations, having boundaries, having rules. Just because you're two people living in a house together, if nothing else, there has to be some sense of structure. And then also listening to your kids, being receptive to them, and letting them be their own human beings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Which that parenting style is, typically looked at as the ideal by most people
Yeah.
in our profession.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some people in other professions probably would disagree, but creating like healthy boundaries, but also allowing people to be themselves is generally looked on favorably by those of us in this mental health world here. And that's likely what parent coaching will focus on, is how do you create a system of rules so you're not getting walked on by a child, because God damn it, they will try.
Yeah. Because I know the popular parenting that's kind of coming through right now is like gentle parenting. And I haven't read anything about it. So a lot of what I've learned is very like anecdotal or like things here and there. But it does seem to be more on the authoritative parenting side. And I think the name is what's throwing a lot of people and making them think it's like permissive parenting. That it's like you're an adult getting on your hands and knees for your kid and being like, oh no, are you sad? Well, then of course we can't do this today, my sad, lovely child. Would you like a hug and to lay down, and I'll get you a blanket and a baby cappuccino, and like you can watch, a goofy movie until your heart gives out. Like, when in actuality, what I understand of gentle parenting is that like you very gently kind of tell a kid, even when they're really young, that's not how we're going to do it. Like, we don't hit, we don't throw, but we're going to do this instead. Right. What do you need? So it is that middle of like, you are still telling a kid what is and is not okay, what is and is not allowed, while also trying to communicate with them and not just shut them down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a big part of why people in our field really look at it is because it really shows it helps model a healthy relationship, of having healthy boundaries, of asking for what you need when you need it, of being able to in some ways follow some, simple rules there's rules we have to follow in society.
Yeah.
Right? So like it only makes sense. Yeah, it only makes sense that you are helping a child understand that in a way that isn't trying to dominate them.
Yeah.
Or trying for them just to follow a rule just because you can make them follow a rule.
Right. Or make them do things because it builds character.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure
trash.
Pete really probably thinks that he is molding PJ into being a strong man, and like if he was soft on him, then he's going to be a soft adult. Like,
and it'll be like
Pete's,
goof.
Yeah, Pete's definitely got a lot of propaganda he's buying and selling to legitimize the way that he is treating his child. And I mean, probably if I had to put money on it, I'm sure this is the way that Pete was raised. And so I think also when people are raised like that and then they have a kid, it's kind of this, I don't know if I want to use the word sick, but it is sort of this like, okay, now I finally get to take my turn of being the one in charge. Like I paid my dues, and so when I work with families where they come from that sort of background, a thing I have to work on with parents who've gone through that is, well, but I don't hit them. I just scream in their face. And I'm like, that's not better, because you're being a slightly less horrific than you were treated, or that very like, well, I turned out fine, so this is obviously the way to go. So I think sometimes too, when you're working with parents where you're trying to coach them into a different parenting style, like you have to acknowledge that there's going to be a lot, sometimes an impossible level of like resistance, because it requires sometimes a lot of acknowledgement of the way they were raised and of the potential maybe trauma they went through. And that's hardcore, for someone like Pete to admit that what they're doing is not working. Sometimes they'd then have to admit that that their story of how they were raised is different. And that is too much for some people. They will shut you down and walk out of your office before they will go there.
Absolutely.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
A lot of, it's very like, when this doesn't get talked about as much, which I think is kind of the shift that we're seeing societally towards more like gentle parenting, is I used to have talks with parents about whoopings when I was new to the field like 10 years ago. And I haven't had to talk about whoopings in a long time. but like in defending it, even the kids too, defending it. Like I used to work with teenagers where they would defend in group that like whoopings are good for you. And that, and then I remember one time I was in a group and we had a visiting psychologist and he said, can I make a observation? Because they were all defending whoopings, all the kids in the circle. And he was like, you guys all got whoopings? And they were like, yeah. And he's like, and you're all here in this group? And they're like, yeah. And he was like, so like, how helpful are whoopings if we're all here?
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't remember what happened after that. So I don't know if everyone kind of just collectively shut down when he made that observation. But, you know, like it's been a tried and true method for a long time, kind of that authoritarian parenting.
Yep. But we also have learned that one of the criticisms against that is that we teach children that when you are angry or upset with someone for not doing what you want, it is okay, therefore, to hit them. Because children's minds are not complete. Their brain development is not where yours is as an adult. And no matter how hard you try to make them think or see that the way that you do, they are not biologically capable of it yet.
Yeah.
So they learn things very simply. If I get mad enough at somebody, I can hit them.
And they deserve it, and I'm right to do it.
Which, if you've noticed, as the shift towards gentle parenting goes on, we see less fights in schools. Like schoolyard fights used to be a thing all the fucking time. But as that's slowed down, I am very curious. I mean, they also tolerate it less in schools now too, but I think that there has been a societal shift in how often kids just start wailing on each other. And I'm curious to see what statistics would say about that.
That would be interesting. Probably won't know for like a while now because it's such a new, like this generation or like the alphas, I think are the generation that are being like fully more raised the gentle parenting style.
Is that what these new youngins are? Alphas?
Below Gen Zs are alphas.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. So Ava probably is an alpha.
Probably.
And doesn't she know it?
Oh, she knows it. She knows everywhere she goes that she is an alpha as soon as she feels comfortable. Yes.
Other thing I wanted to point out, I can't believe I'm about to say this. It's so funny to me how we will do these movies that are so like wholesome and cheesy and kid movies, and I will talk about the darkest stuff. So buckle up, everybody. Spoiler, or not spoiler, but trigger warning here is like also I was watching recently that Shiny Happy People documentary about the Duggar family and the religious sect that they are from. And another thing that I thought was really interesting that it feels important to say out loud as well, is that they were raised in like a super obedience oriented way of life. And so a lot of the people that were raised in that way of life in the documentary talk about how being raised in this very like authoritarian, like almost like break your spirit, kind of more like I think where PJ is gone, like where he's not a fighter in response to his dad's thing. He's just very subservient and very submissive. Is that then you can create a kid who is more likely to be victimized by an outside party, some within the family, some without the family, because you're raising someone who does not question authority, you know, is totally obedient, totally submissive, you know, doesn't know how to stand up for themselves, you know, and so that is the risk you are also taking by being a very authority, obedient, like compliant, driven parent. Is that what kind of child are you raising? Are you raising someone who's gonna, because I think that's where it's like unfair. It's like these kids don't know how to pick and choose which adults they're totally submissive to. So if you raise kids to be submissive to the parents and their adults in their household, adults in their community, like why would they all of a sudden when someone's being inappropriate, they're not going to find the grit inside of them miraculously to then question for the first time an adult and fight against an adult. They're going to get taken advantage of. And so too, like I think when I work with parents now as well, and when I work with parents who still have a more authoritarian approach, everybody just like take a drink whenever I can't say that word successfully the first time. Anyway, I do talk to them about like, why does it feel so important that your kid be so compliant? And, you know, and I'm no longer, as a family therapist, I'm no longer interested in aiding in creating submissive kids. And I think when I first started in the field, that was more of the flavor, like creating kids who are mindful, but like mindful in the old school version of the word, which is mind your parents, learn how to behave, be quiet and be good. And now I have more of a holistic thought process of like, we want kids to obey structure, because like you were saying, Ben, like or Hannah, that we're in a society where there are rules, right? And expectations, but we also don't want to make them so quote unquote good that that we break their spirit.
Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, if you look at the difference of kids across parenting styles, you can tell who feels like they have some space to do things and who doesn't. And this movie shows like a great contrast between Max feeling like he has enough in him to let his creativity shine and make something happen, and PJ, who's terrified to do so.
Yeah.
But PJ doesn't know who he is at all, and Max is kind of anxious, but like when he's ready to be confident, we see that Goofy has very obviously let him be confident being who he is, because they get on stage at the end of this movie with the Goofy movie version of Michael Jackson in the 90s. Like there was no bigger anything in 1995.
Yeah.
And just do their dance and then just start dancing. And we already saw him do it in front of the whole school. That's not going to just happen. You're not going to believe you can pull some high level shit off like that if you don't have some gumption that and reinforcement throughout your life that, no, actually, your clever idea, well, that can work. And you see Goofy reinforce that. Like, I forgot what exactly he said, but there's something he says of like, well, I guess we're just going to have to get you on that stage.
Yeah. It's very, very sweet. Which you're right, like, yeah.
But then he says something along the lines of like, basically, like, if you can dream it, you can do it. I forgot what he said, but that wasn't the first time Max had heard that.
No. Yeah. Goofy feels like a parent that definitely has a lot of like aphorisms and mantras and like encouraging motivational quotes that he probably has embroidered in pillows and cross stitched, like in framed cross stitches and that kind of thing.
Oh,
in a positive way, in a very sweet way. Definitely.
But being in, like, I'm with you on like, I won't coach people into authoritarian status either, because it's just, I don't see the value in it. I see the value in boundary setting and limit setting, but if you crush someone's personality out of them, you can't possibly empower them to develop in who they need to be. And that's missing the entire point of being a parent, I think.
So we'll take a break here and be right back. So I want to just note this in the movie, and then we'll kind of switch into the parenting a teen specifically, which you've already been touching on. But I think where we see Goofy make that switch is when he lets Max be the navigator and he lets him start picking the spots along the way. I think that was a great example of switching to that more like authoritative parenting style, when he still is like, we're not going home. We're still on this trip together. There's still expectations around how we're with each other. And I'm recognizing that trying to shove down what I think we should be doing on this trip isn't working. And so I'm going to allow you freedom, get to know you and listen to you, and allow you to pick some of the stuff that we do. And as we see in the movie, that when he starts doing that, not only does Max start having a better time, but Max also becomes more open to the things that are specific to Goofy, like taking him to the biggest yarn ball in the world.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's so interesting that when you give a child, even a teenage version, space to be themselves, that they're going to be more willing to let you do the same. And I think that's a really like powerful part of that journey where like Goofy is not acting like himself, and then Max therefore like shuts down into a shitty version of himself, and then they loosen up and become flexible again.
Yeah,
Sorry, Hannah, go
absolutely.
ahead.
No. I was thinking that something I'm sure I've said on the podcast before, but teenagers really want to be trusted. They really want to be trusted with really anything. And so when he hands that map over to him, it really feels like that's such a huge sign of trust. And any teenager, I think, would really, I don't know whether or not they'd admit it, but they would really thrive in a position where that's an opportunity that they have. Like I have a chance to be trusted. And Max kind of messes that up a little bit, right? Like there's no doubt that he doesn't mess that up, but also that's a part of the reason why we give teenagers chances for us to trust them, because A, they need to learn to trust themselves, and B, they need to make the mistakes that they're going to make with us when the consequences are something that we have control over.
That's a great point. I wrote in my notes, this is a hard lesson that Max is learning, which is, you're right, which is that he, makes kind of a thoughtless choice, or just a very self-centered choice based on his hormones, and which we know is a very developmentally appropriate thing, which is caring way more about your peers' opinion of you than your parents, and absolutely like antisocially level, like stepping on your parents' heart to get to good graces with people who don't even know you and will have no impact on your life in 2 to 4 years. And so he's learning that hard lesson, which is there are other people that I have to think about when I want to do something for myself. And you're right in that. I love what you said, Hannah, in that, Goofy's allowing him to learn this lesson in a more controlled atmosphere. And I think parents lose that understanding sometimes, especially when they're more helicoptery parents, not necessarily like dominant in like the authoritarian way, but more like helicopter parents, which is another parenting style kind of, where they don't want their kids to go through any bad experiences. And so they shelter them from bad outcomes. And I have to teach parents, you have to give your kids opportunities to tolerate frustration, to go through hard situations when it's not going to be a huge risk. It's going to feel huge because when you're that age, everything feels like the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone on the face of this planet Earth. But in this situation, all that Goofy's risking is his heart. You know what I mean? With Max, but in an appropriate way.
Yeah. And he is, and unfortunately he gets stepped on by a teenager, which tends to happen when we give teenagers freedom to make decisions but are unsupervised in that decision-making process. There should be checks and balances because teenagers are supposed to test us as parents. They're supposed to be trying to figure out what they can do and what they can't do. And also that thing that I mentioned with having undeveloped brains, when they get anxious or feel that their social status is in danger, this is a phrase you will hear me say all the time, is that their little brain turns whatever they're afraid of into a tiger. And it becomes their priority one, that they need to survive an attack by that tiger. So their brain is shifting from the logical processing side that's on the left to the emotional reactive processing side that is on the right. And they will make really bad decisions because they're trying to rely on their smarts when they're in reactive mode.
I think what we're talking about with Max too, which is very age appropriate, is like the movie opens up with him having a bad dream that he's becoming his dad, which is a true nightmare for any teenager, that they're going to become their parent, but also a parent who is, goofy and goofy, and Ayuck, the Garsh, who is this,
Garsh.
because no offense to Goofy, but he's not cool from a teenager's point of view. Like, he's very vulnerable. He's very emotional in a way that I think is sweet. He's very wholesome. He's not edgy at all. He's not cool or trying to be cool. He's very like, what's that show, Andy? Black and white show.
Andy Griffith?
The Andy Griffith show. Like, yes, like very Andy Griffith, which is very not cool, very Disney. And Max is a typical 90s kid, trying to be cool, trying to be edgy, wearing his hoodie, hanging out with like the weird kids, you know, listening to rock music, playing air guitar, the Janko jeans. Oh God,
the baggy jeans. Everybody that just you see it coming back now. And you just go like, what? No, some stuff from the '90s is good, but not that. Don't do that.
And I think what Goofy is not doing as well in the beginning of the movie or the first half, which I think is also very typical and not in a bad way, just kind of the learning curve for parents, is that he doesn't want anything to do with his dad. He doesn't want him to driving him to school. He doesn't want to listen to the music his dad listens to. He doesn't want to do the things his dad wants to do. I mean, I would argue that the stuff on the trip, I'm sure there's some of it that Max actually would be open to doing and ends up being open to doing if it wasn't like a direct reflection of his father.
Right.
And so when I also work with parents and when their kids are starting to get older, get to this age, a really hard conversation is that they have to stop taking their kids' behaviors personally. In that, you will get your feelings hurt by your kid 1,000%. They can be vicious as teenagers and they want nothing to do with you. They think you suck. But that's all age appropriate. And when I tell parents it's don't take it personal, what I mean is like, this is a common, appropriate teenage developmental moment that you could be the most coolest parent on planet Earth and they would likely have this reaction to you. So you can't take it personal in that it's not about you specifically as a person. It's just the time of life. And it's actually a good sign if you're getting some rejection from your kids and if they are more engrossed with their peers. And that is just, I mean, the new version of this, when I talk to parents, is like social media. And they're also like freaks and obsessed about social media and how much their kids are on their phones and whatever. And I tried to tell parents, I'm like, how much were you on the landline to your friends? You know, how much were you going to the mall? And
dude, why are you making me feel 100 years old right now?
But I mean, like, you have to make those one-to-one connections to let parents know that we were doing our own version of that behavior, which was isolation from the family and total immersion and total caught upness with your friends and with your peers.
Oh, yeah.
And now the internet is the mall, if you will.
Dude, parents just
Snapchat
don't understand. I don't know what to tell you.
They just don't understand. Will Smith was right. And so I think, but just even like the power struggle in the car over the music, you know, all those things, I think that is that thing where parents will struggle to let go. Yeah. And, you know, and not, they're trying to make their kid a little kid again, and you can't do it. Sorry to say.
But that doesn't go backwards.
You're right. It's just so appropriate for kids to rebel and push back and test, just like Max does in the movie, where like he's got his own agenda, because kids have their own agenda and they're supposed to be trying out their own power in the world. They're supposed to be doing that. And they're supposed to be figuring out how they can use their skills plus the things that the parents have taught them to survive the world. That's where that proverb comes in that I love so much. I almost want to like put it on my wall in my office so people remember when we're having conversations about teenagers being shitheads is, hey, kids are, you can't keep them locked into whatever your perception of the world is, because their world's entirely different.
Yeah.
Our parents did not understand that if you wore the same pair of jeans to school 2 days in a row, you were going to get lit up. And they didn't understand that if you didn't have Jordans, you were getting lit up. And that if you had the wrong Jordans, you were getting lit up. And if you had Jordans, no, you're going to get your ass beat for the Jordans. Well, they understood that one.
But going back to what you were saying, Hannah, about the trust thing, is I think also something I really liked, which I do think is important with parenting a teen, is when, even though unfortunately Goofy was proven wrong, when Pete tries to undermine, which he does several times in the movie, trying to undermine the Max and Goofy dynamic, which I'd be curious with Pete, like, why can't you leave them alone anyway?
Agreed.
Like, Lady Death protests too much. If you really think what you're doing is correct, why are you so perturbed by other people doing it differently? And when he tells Goofy in the hot tub that he knows that Max is being, deceitful, I do like that Goofy says, like, I'm going to choose to trust Max. And he really decides to keep trusting him until he gets definitively proven wrong by Max, right? Yeah. And I really like that moment because Goofy was trying to give him the opportunity to pleasantly surprise him, because there's a very different version of that story where he could have just laid in to Max and been like, I can't believe you, yada, yada. And because what I think he really did, which we were just talking about, is he let Max sort of experience the natural consequences of making a bad decision, of making a selfish decision. Because you can see right away, Max, well, he's conflicted the whole time. And then right away, he's like, oh, no. And that feeling is how you learn. Like, Max would learn a bajillion times more from that experience of Goofy kind of swerving onto the road and just like taking a breath away from him. That feeling will stay with Max way longer as like a core memory than if Goofy had just recreated like the power struggle dynamic between them. And then Max could get defensive and he could say, I don't know what you're talking about. It could have easily fallen apart and Max wouldn't have learned the lesson. But this way, Goofy was letting him just learn from this situation and really feel the discomfort. And that discomfort is what stays with us and helps us learn.
Ooh, I thought I saw that different.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, that was the outcome.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. But I think Goofy was being passive there.
Oh.
I think he was being permissive. Like, I think he was not building up the courage to confront Max, even though it was quite obviously, as demonstrated by his visual disruption, or I think the visible disruption in his being, not visual,
he saw the
but
map
visible.
too, so he knew for sure that Max was being deceitful or secretive.
Oh yeah, he knew.
He
knew, and he was disappointed. But I think had it felt more deliberate that he was doing that, like he was, it seemed to me, which is just my interpretation, right? Could be wrong, is that Goofy was not demonstrating enough assertiveness there. Like, he didn't need to come in and blow Max up, but it was obvious, like, he already knew, and he was extremely disappointed and distressed when he came in and just like laid down destitute. Never mind that PJ was still there.
Yeah.
But I think he was being like his typical non-confrontational self and like letting it kind of eat at him, which can happen when there's too much of that permissive parenting style, so much of that buddy thing is like they're not taking on the role of parent actively enough in situations like that where they know they're being wrong, but then they won't confront the child and it eats them up until they bottle it up and explode, which is basically exactly what happened, the way I saw it.
Yeah.
Because Goofy just like goes.
I really felt like he knew that his son, I really felt like he was giving his son a chance to tell him. And that he was giving him a chance to make a different decision.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
I don't, whether or not it was him being too anxious to bring it up to Max. I don't know. I feel like he was trying to give him a chance.
Well, that I agree with. I think it was after it became clear, and then like Goofy, rather than like confronting it immediately, was like losing his shit.
I mean, I definitely could
He was
see...
hoping. Absolutely, I agree with that.
That's what I was thinking. I could definitely see where his sort of like willful optimism was almost like a coping mechanism.
Right.
Presented in that space as well, of like, I have to believe that Max is a good boy who wouldn't do this to me until like I'm aggressively confronted with the fact that he's like proving me wrong about this, like that he's not just like the good boy that I want him to be. I did like that, which I don't think this is necessarily his intention, but I just want to point this out. I liked that he pulled the car over and he made space He like went and made his own space for Max. You know, I think that's always a tried and true parenting strategy, which is if you're too heated, take a breath. You don't have, there's very few things in life that you have to do right then, that you have to approach right then. The only time you really have to do like immediate reactionary stuff is like when kids are really small, because they struggle to like, they just don't have like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like they, not the short term memory, but they like things will lose meaning really quickly if they don't have the connection.
Object permanence.
Yeah, object permanence. But once kids get older, obviously by Max's age, like you can let them sweat it while you figure out what you're gonna do. And I think yeah, and the old term for that, which is bad because it goes back to whooping, is like don't hit when you're angry. Don't spank when you're angry because you'll hit too hard. And I would say switch up the spank part with parent. Like don't parent when you're too angry unless it's an emergency. Because you're not going to parent thoughtfully. You're going to parent out of your own emotional reaction.
You mean kind of like when you lose your keys and tear up the couch cushions and empty the garbage can all over the floor?
Yell at your kids.
And the dog, right.
Yeah.
Get out of my way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I did like that he pulled over and he went and he took a breather. He like looked over the cliff and he was like, I'm going to be by myself. And then I mean, honestly, and also too, like this sounds a little more nefarious. It can be a good learning experience. Let the kid kind of sit in their own shit for a little bit, you know what I mean? And stew and that you're not going to take that away from them right away. That's a learning experience as well of like, you know, I'm not going to, like I said earlier, I'm not going to save you from this unpleasant situation. And then they had to, you know, ford a river and then have that really hard conversation in which no mother was mentioned. Oh, I can't get over that.
Nope, no mother mentioned at all. Nothing. Just never in the goof troop, never anything.
Like for real. Like I think, do you think that goofs like procreate like worms? And like maybe one day he like really hard and like Max came out like an egg?
I don't know that I want to consider that as a possibility at this moment in time. I can tell you that right now.
I will say, Max.
My brain just broke. Imagine,
but I don't know.
I mean,
someone make us
dogs.
fan art. Someone make us fan art of that. And
no,
send
don't ask the internet for that. Don't do that.
Thank you.
No. I apologize to everyone listening for whatever's going to show up on our social media pages because Brittany just asked for that. And if you throw up in your mouth, just mail it in a little bag to Brittany.
Oh no, I hate that. No.
But Goofy's a dog. He's a dog.
Yeah, I mean, yes, technically yes, but also Pluto's a dog, and they don't have the same.
They don't have the same
like way about the world.
No, they don't.
Same personhood. But I would say they have that hard conversation at the river, and I think that was also Goofy learning, you know, that Max is his kid, not his friend. Like maybe they can become friendly, like become friends as Max gets older. But, you know, it's that hard thing for Goofy as well of like, your kid is not your best friend. They're not supposed to be your best friend. Sorry for all people out there who say things like, I gave birth to my best friend. Stop and go make a same age peer. Pause this podcast and go make a same age peer and then play
right now
when you've made a friend. And so, but they have that good heart to heart where I think they both acknowledge that their relationship isn't working the way that it's working. And then you're right. Like, I think you mentioned this, Hannah, as soon as they come to that realization, Goofy's right on board. You know, I think he's such a great parent to Max, and he really lets him flourish and goes with him to Los Angeles. And I like that he doesn't become totally punitive as well once Max discloses everything.
Yeah.
And tells him the truth and tells him about Roxanne. I think also what Goofy does really well in parenting a teenager, but a kid of any age, is he's like, he doesn't get stuck on what Max has done wrong. I think the first thing he says is, "Oh my God, you are like, have a crush on a girl."
Yeah.
And
I think that's
how
the
wonderful,
first thing he says.
You know? And he really does a great job of paying attention to what the kid thinks is important, what Max thinks is important. So many
he really
parents,
does immediately. Like he does not even though he's been upset with Max, as soon as he gets a reason for the deviant behavior, he in couples and family terms, he turned towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I heard this really great quote from a not great reference source, but I'm stole the quote from her. She's like a YouTube person. And she did say, though, if your kid does something that is if your kid gets in trouble and that's out of character for them, then something's wrong. If getting in trouble is out of character for your kid, then something is wrong. And so I think Goofy kind of exemplifies this in this movie, which by this point in the movie, where instead of getting hung up on my kid made a mistake and fucked up and did something really stupid and bad, he instead is like curious about how he got there, why it's important to him, you know. And I think that's something that adults don't pay enough attention to as well, is that, and I think you brought this up earlier, Ben, is that kids have these really important things and they're important to them. Don't worry about if it's relative to you and whether you think it's important or not. Right. You know, something when I worked exclusively with teenagers, something I had to say a lot is to the adults in the mix is if it's important to them, it's important. And that's it. Like,
and nothing telling you them can say stupid, or do, she's going to change that.
Yeah, me telling them it's stupid or irrational or silly is like demeaning. It's shutting them down. It's invalidating, and it's going to make them want to tell me to fuck off or just not talk to me ever again. And so if you want your kids not to talk to you ever again about anything real, you can make fun of what they like and what they're into and why they think something's important. But instead, like, Goofy is full in, and he does the power line thing, I think, goes to the concert because he recognizes this is important to Max. You know, whether I think it's silly or not is inconsequential. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, and parents have to realize that whatever is important to the kids, whether, you know, for the generation that slime was like the biggest thing. Like, these kids were making slime.
When I worked at my first PHP, we had to ban silly bands because of the kerfuffle, the internal drama that was occurring due to silly bands and how important they were to kids.
Right. I mean, and think about for us, it was Pogs. Like, how long before Pogs got banned at your school? You know, like they eventually got banned and right, because it's
such a deep cut reference. Pogs.
I don't think I remember what got banned where I was, or maybe I didn't care, or maybe I didn't have one. Maybe that's what it was. Anyway,
there's definitely things that were silly.
Yeah, that were like banned for no reason.
Yeah,
Tamagotchis, Pokemon cards for the kids a little bit younger than us.
Yeah,
Hannah, you might have been just a little bit too old for Pogs.
They also were not cool. They were literally just like cardboard discs that I think there was a game associated with them, but mostly people just collected them.
No, there was a game, and
I know there was a game, but I didn't know a single person who knew how to play it. It was all just like having Pogs.
People knew how to play. Where the fights would start is because the way the game was supposed to be played was that the things you flipped over, if you won, you got the other people's shit.
It was like marbles.
Yeah.
Like modern day marbles.
Basically. Milk
marbles
caps.
are better.
But it was terrible, and it got banned immediately because Hannah, might have been Micro Machines for you. Who knows?
In high school?
Not high school. No, it would have been like junior high or grade school, not high school.
Yeah.
But just the ridiculous things.
Well, is there anything else we want to say about parenting a teen, or specifically Max and Goofy's relationship, before we head into treatment?
That's just very important to create space. Create space to let the kid develop and be who they're going to be. You guide them, you encourage them, but you also create space to let them have their own identity, because they're going to do it with or without you, and they're going to do it with your knowledge or without, but they're still going to become whoever they are. And the more space they have to talk to you, and the more willing you are to be like Goofy, and like you're saying, Brittany, if your kid is suddenly doing something deviant, like, there's a reason for it.
Yeah. They didn't just decide to be a dick one day.
No, I mean, if your kid's always a dick, well, then that's a different discussion.
That's indicative of something more.
Right.
But if your kid's all of a sudden in trouble, like, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. If they're demonstrating a change in behavior, find out what it is. before going on a punishment spree are just assuming that they're like an asshole are going to get the electric chair now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing Goofy says in this movie is it says to Pete, like, maybe I should back off. And he was right. He backed off and still had expectations, but backed off, found that middle ground, and it went great.
Yeah.
Right. Goofy, there's the other thing parents need to remember is to be yourself.
Yeah, you're right. Goofy doesn't ever try to be cooler. He doesn't start like wearing Jinko jeans and like listening to hard rock music. Like he goes along with what Max likes, but he's also not trying to change himself.
Well, he does try to change. That's where the problem comes in. That's the the MacGuffin of the movie, right? Is that he starts trying to be like Pete.
I guess what I more mean is like he's not trying to be like Max. Like he's not trying to be a teenager and relate to him like that.
Oh no.
Which is what sometimes parents do as well.
Right. You're absolutely right. Like Amy Poehler in Mean Girls.
Oh yeah. Be a cool mom.
Be a cool mom.
Which also did not work in that movie. Her kids also still didn't like her.
And was a monster.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will take a break here and then come back for treatment. All right. I can go first. So, like I mentioned, I think I would want to work with Goofy because I think he needs some confidence building around his parenting. I think he's got the goods, as we saw in this movie. I just think he needs positive reinforcement because he just doesn't have a good support system. I would also help him work on getting a support system. They do reference Donald Duck. I don't know if Max was making a joke at his expense or if he's really friends with Donald Duck. Maybe so. Because also there's a Mickey Mouse phone that Max uses. So I don't understand the world of Disney and how it weaves in.
Right. And Mickey Mouse, Mickey is, hitchhiking. So.
Yeah, is he just a celebrity in this? Whatever. But I would encourage...
It's like Jerry Seinfeld. He's a celebrity, but nobody thinks he's a celebrity. Nobody treats him like a celebrity.
And so I think with Goofy, want to teach him coping skills for anxiety because that doesn't just go away. Like we talk about, like there's the magic of movies where they act like whatever ails you gets fixed within that tight 90 minutes to 2 hours. So just because he and
I
Max
love Disney in the
this,
90s, man. They were on their shit at this point.
Yeah. So his anxiety is not just going to magically disappear by the end of this movie.
No.
Just because he had a good trip with Max at the end. Like, I think he would still need to learn how to differentiate when he's feeling anxious and parenting out of anxiety, maybe learning if he's feeling it in his body, if he's like getting those intrusive thoughts about Max in his future, like what if thing, like he's someone I'd probably teach cognitive distortions to. So when we're catastrophizing, when we're fortune telling, we're mind reading, all that stuff, and what we can do instead to help with that thought challenging techniques. And then, like I said, I think he just needs, because he hasn't had a partner, I think he just needs, I think that's the benefit of, even though I do individual therapy with adults, where my background is like a child therapist and a family therapist comes in handy, because then I can help parents with this part of it and do a little psychoeducation about Max. Like I would be someone who would say, he's actually at a very appropriate age to be doing this stuff and normalizing things, because also if Goofy is more isolated socially, makes me curious if he's, other than Pete and PJ, if he's seeing other parent and kid dynamics. So I think also what's hard about that is then you don't know if what you're going through is unique to you or if it's like every teenager does this. So I think, I don't know, he'd be someone who where he would really flourish. I think he would flourish in like a parenting group, like a group of like parents who get together like potluck style, like book club style and chit chat. Like I used to run a parent support group at one of the jobs I had. And I think he would flourish in a space where he got to like make a dish, make a casserole, take it to someone's house and just like have like a group of friends, a group of other parents that he can chit chat to about. I think he'd even do well if it was in just a group of moms, like just to chit chat to and get a sense of how he's doing as a parent and get validated from a peer group. So I think I would work on him with that in the office, but then I would also try to really encourage him to build that out within his own life. Also, I would love to know where's the mother of his child? I'd have to know that. And maybe that would give us some answers into where else we would go with the work we do together. But yeah, I think he would be a nice client to have. I think he'd come in very open, very wanting to learn, and just needing like terminology. He seems like someone who just needs psychoeducation. And once they know like the language and the terms and the concepts, that he would be very open to applying them. And he's a client that I think his progress would be great, like in a short amount of time, because he seems really receptive and open and emotionally tuned in. Like he doesn't seem scared of vulnerability and emotions and things like that, and that is great.
Goofy was a great dad, and I was like, where's that dad in the 90s? There was, the only other dad like that on TV at that point in time was Bob Saget.
Oh yeah, another single dad. Yeah, but I think also with Goofy, we probably could say that because his relationship with his dad seemed really nice and really like connected and sweet and loving. So I'm not surprised that Goofy is also that way with his son. It seems like he had a very sweet relationship with his dad. Yeah. And so that'd also be something we could process in therapy together too, of like, what was your relationship like with your dad? And do we need to do some like maybe even grief over the fact that like your relationship with your son isn't that easy? Or just you don't maybe have that much naturally in common with Max, but what do you have in common? And focusing on that. So that's what I would do with Mr. Goof.
Oh, Hannah, you want to go next? Show me too. Oh, no, me. Okay. So I will go in a role reversal here. I will take the child and I will pick Max. And I think with Max, I see some hallmark signs that Max has some self-confidence issues and thinks that he's not enough. And the intro nightmare had a kind of double impact thing of the first thing that started going on was that it was obvious the things that he was a little insecure about, his teeth, his nose, like being a little bit bigger, his feet, all those things like were the things that started growing first before he turned into his dad. So all that striking while he's trying to, have this relationship, this romantic moment with a really strangely over-sexualized anthropomorphic dog in Roxanne. But you look at that scene, to me, I was like watching that of going like, yep, all the things that make you self-conscious and a nightmare all of a sudden getting 10 to 100 times worse and then turning into your dad. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. And this coming from someone else that looks exactly like his father in ways that are frightening. I would want to work with Max that he's not sure of who he is, and he's in that kind of teenage space of thinking he needs to be something more and bigger and better than who he is, and that the things that he's self-conscious about, he can't see that other people, including Roxanne, might find endearing. She tells him straight out, like she's been waiting for him to ask, and she's thought he was cute since the first time she heard him, Ayuck. Which I thought was like a really, Disney's writing is tight. It's always tight. The writing is so tight. They tie things right back into each other, and they did it again of showing like, hey, the thing you might be least secure about yourself might be the thing someone else finds cute or endearing about you. So maybe don't shit on yourself.
Yeah.
Because someone else might think that's cute about you. And lo and behold, that's exactly what Roxanne likes about him, is that he's a little bit goofy.
Yes, she does.
She does. She likes that about him. And then I think he's trying to be this like uber confident thing and like literally Batman his way into getting her affection by creating gadgets and all of these tech things to win her affection, when really all she wants is for him to just ask her.
You really elbowed that Batman reference in at the last minute.
Yeah, you really did. You pulled
a hamstring trying to make that reach.
Yeah.
You know what? What I was thinking of was, how do I explain Mallrats and Batman together? And then I realized like that's going to get overcomplicated, because a lot of the things that happen in this are pretty similar to the crap that Kevin Smith pulls in Mallrats, of trying to like build a whole pulley and rig system to pull off all this elaborate shit.
Yeah.
But I figured I probably just better leave that alone. And then I went and did it anyway. So you're welcome. But the importance of this movie in reminding people that just you as you are enough. And I think with Max, I would want to really sit down and create some space to process with him how it went with this girl telling him exactly that it wasn't about all of this stuff that you did, all this fantastical stuff. You didn't have to do all that to get noticed. And what would it be like for you to try to create what in EMDR we would call a resource point, or even hypnosis, create an internal resource. IFS would call it an internal resource. It's all the same concept. How do we create a positive memory marker for you that you were vulnerable, told the truth, and just showed someone 5 seconds of vulnerability to be yourself, and just ask, hey, I'd like to go out, and would you like to come with me? And she said, yes.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to do all that bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
You just were enough. She just liked you. Just be you. That's it. To create that for a teenager is really empowering, that you can just be you, and that's good enough. I think that would be the direction I want to go for Max, to work on, like, hey, you had this fantastical adventure where everything went your way and it worked out because #Disney, but also let's look at in real life, that's going to be a lot of really grandiose effort to get a date, man. Like,
Yeah, it's a grand gesture, as you said in the beginning, Hannah. That's a huge gesture.
it's a huge gesture. And then, like, how much anxiety have we seen it create in people where they create a system of completely unmanageable, unattainable expectations that they create for themselves that aren't what their partner even wants.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want you to do all this fantastical shit. I want you to sit down and watch a movie with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to work 80 hours a week and then come home and then put me on this magical trip and buy me all this stuff I want. I just want you to sit down and snuggle me on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'd be an important lesson for him to learn early, that it's not doing all this crazy stuff that made you you. It's that you can do that, but you don't have to. And let's build some confidence.
All right, Hannah.
Well, I was thinking about doing therapy with PJ.
Oh, yay.
And what it would be like to have him as a teenager, like the age that he is. And maybe thinking about the way he would get there is maybe like he would talk to his school therapist, like the school social worker or something, and then would be connected to me through there. Because I think that that's probably the most likely way a kid like him would see a therapist. And maybe in some cases he wouldn't, because his parent doesn't believe in mental health. And when you have parents who don't believe that mental health is a thing, you're much less likely to get the help that you actually need.
Yeah, PJ feels like a kid that would either talk exclusively to their school therapist and their dad would never have to know, or it would have to be mandated therapy in some way where his dad can't intervene.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because his son wouldn't have any therapy. Not his son.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it just made me think about how important it would be with a kid like PJ to help him understand that he has a right to be himself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does.
And that he's allowed to do things that he wants to do. And so it would be this would be an experience which is pretty common. The work that I do with teenagers is really letting them lead in some kind of way, especially if they're being sent by their parent to come and see me for one reason or another, is really helping them feel like they have power not like power and control, like the way that it works with parents, but like that they have this space that they're allowed to use however they want to use it. And how important I think that would be for PJ to have that. And also I would want to help teach him some skills of how to manage his anxiety and his worry, his constant worry that he probably experiences about his dad. And it might be one of those situations where as he gets older and it becomes more appropriate to kind of say, you know, your dad is very inflexible, and helping him understand that this just is just the dad that you ended up with. And that it's hard when we have a parent who isn't willing to see us or who isn't willing to let us be who we are in any kind of way.
Yeah, it is.
And really giving him the space to be able to have that space for himself instead of waiting for his dad to try and create that space for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Which you see him
so-
try to do when he's like dancing and having his like vacuuming, like doing his chores, but he's like committing to being himself.
Yeah.
It wants to
he
come
is.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He's so close and he just has to turn into this. In some ways, I would imagine he's in survival mode when he's around his dad.
Oh, 1,000%. Yes, sir.
You
No,
know?
sir. Like,
Yeah.
he seems like the
Yeah.
kind of kid that once he really trusted that you wouldn't tell his dad anything or that it wouldn't get to his dad, I feel like he'd be the kid that would just spill his guts to you every week.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he would flourish probably in therapy once he trusted the dynamic.
Mhm.
And where's his mom?
Yeah, where's everybody's
Where are the
moms?
mothers? Where are the maybe not even mothers, but where are the secondary parents?
Where are the other caregivers? The other
also
caregivers?
Roxanne. We only see his dad. Her dad.
Hey. Dads can parent, okay?
That's not what I'm saying. I said, where are the secondary parents? Also,
Or the grandparents or anybody, right?
Yeah.
Just where are the other caregivers? Like where
Yeah.
are the other caregivers in these
Yeah.
in these relationships? Whether it's a grandparent or a spouse or a close friend, whoever it is, where the hell are they? Because they're missing.
Did they
So yeah,
have many adult women in this movie at all besides the dancers and the secretary?
no. The closest thing we got to adult woman in this movie was the class president. She had the authority of a grown-up, but she was very much a child still.
yeah.
But no, there isn't really like Roxanne's dad opens the door. We don't see her mom.
Nope.
Oh my God, there really isn't. Even like at the possum thing, the host was a dude. You do see some mothers there, but yeah, that's interesting. Interesting.
Like the Goof universe, there are no.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe they have a different way of procreating in the Goofy universe.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe they do. Maybe they do.
But there are girls at school. Anyway.
Yeah. It's confusing.
When you're in the Goofy movie, it's like the Hunger Games, and at a certain age, all the women has to go into the woods, and none of them survive.
Oh my God, maybe.
But I think PJ would flourish in therapy. Especially, I think you and he would be a good fit, actually.
I think it would work really well. So that's what I would do. That's the work that I would do with PJ. And I have heard from when I talked to somebody about doing this movie a long time ago, and they said that Goofy is almost like a single dad who's also a man of color. Too.
There's a lot of per TikTok, the Black community has claimed this movie that this is a strong Black family. The Goofs are, and I'm like, okay,
yeah.
All
So I just thought that was
Neil.
interesting. But anyway,
yeah. So we'll take our final break here and then be back with final thoughts. Hannah, since you've never seen this movie before, I'm interested in what your final thoughts are.
Oh, that's right, because we said the Leaning Tower of Cheese and you had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know what you were talking about. So this movie was very cute and sweet, like I knew that it would be, and interesting, and definitely has a 90s Disney feel to it that you can't escape. I don't know if it's the music or the way the cartoon is drawn or the fashion. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something about it that just makes it feel like it just reminded me of watching how often I used to watch Disney movies on a regular basis. So I liked it. I thought it was very sweet. I like the dynamic of the family. I like that Goofy is a good dad and he's a good enough parent. And we always want to see a good enough parent in any kind of story that we're watching, especially any story that has to do with kids. So that was really enjoyable. And I don't know if I'll watch it again just because I don't know why I would watch it again. Yeah, kind of. But it was a very sweet movie, and I get why people like it so much.
This was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I think I used to just mostly rewind the two power line scenes. So the song in the beginning when he does the assembly, and then the concert at the end. I used to just like repeatedly watch those scenes when I would rent this movie from like Blockbuster or the grocery store video store, which we used to go to a lot. And I also used to remember that I used to feel like sick to my stomach when Goofy finds out that Max is lying. Like, I used to feel so bad for Goofy, and it'd make me like, it's one of those things when you're a kid where you don't really have the words yet for what's happening, but you know it's awful, and it just makes your body feels it more, where you're like, I hate this. Like, that's very much like even when I was watching with Hannah today, and I hadn't seen this movie probably in like 25 years. I was like, my stomach still kind of hurts, like the way that it would hurt when I was a kid, because Goofy kept getting his feelings hurt. And I hated it because I could see, even as a kid, I could see how much he was trying, and how, like, I think I used to think that Max was being so mean. And that's how I know I must have been like on the younger side, like 10 or younger when I used to watch it, because I was not relating to Max as like the teenager. I was very much like almost on Goofy's side. So a lot of times when I would watch it. And I forgot that it was a musical outside of the Powerline songs. I was like, what?
100% forgot about all the songs.
Because Hannah was like, this is a musical. And I was like, I did not remember that. I did not recall. I will say, I think because this movie is ingrained in my head as a kid, I was shocked by how simple the story was. It seemed a lot more involved when I was a kid and I watched it, but it's a pretty simple, sweet story. I will say, now watching it as an adult, I like how all the weird little jokes in it that I did not get as a kid. And I really appreciate, like, honestly, it's kind of a progressive view of a single dad. He's like introduced in the movie in kind of a more feminine like look, like he's got like the towel on his head, the towel around him, like a more like a mom would, like our female presenting person, and he's like doing the chores, and it's not one of those like more stereotypical, especially in the 90s kind of movie where it's like this schmuck dad and his schmuck son and they basically live in a bachelor pad together and they need a woman to come in and like make this house a home. It wasn't like that. Like, Goofy was making their house a home, and he very much was like the mommy and the dad, and you could see that right away. And so I loved that the movie wasn't about if he was enough of a parent overall. The movie was more just about like adjusting to your kid as they get older. And I think that is very progressive, especially, like I said, with it being a single dad instead of a single mom. And that the story wasn't like, we need to get a woman in here to like make us a family. So I think it was a really cool, different approach to this kind of story, especially in the 90s. And I really enjoyed it. I definitely am excited to show this to my nieces and nephews when they get a little bit older. I mean, they probably could watch it now because kids there's enough Mickey Mouse looking stuff in the movie and music and noise and color that I think a kid would like it. But I'm excited when they're a little bit older to show it to them and see if they still think it's cool. Hannah and I were in a dance club in Chicago not that long ago, actually, probably in the past year, and they played one of the Powerline songs in the club. It's called Beauty Bar. It's a very cool dance spot, and everyone on the dance floor lost their fucking mind. It's like it took like a few beats for everyone to like understand what was playing. So it was like this delayed, like, wah! When everyone collectively understood. And then poor Hannah, who hadn't watched the movie yet, and she was just kind of standing there in the middle of all these people absolutely going apeshit with like no cultural touch points. But it was like a thrilling moment for sure. So I love this movie. I don't know if I'll watch it again on my own because, you know, as Hannah said, I'm an adult. But I definitely would like to introduce it to the kids in my life once they get a little older.
That makes sense. I love this movie. I remember going to see it in the theater. I've seen it many times. I don't know how many times I went to see it in the theater. It would have been little, but we had a dollar show in the town that I probably have talked about a bunch of times that was my home. I loved that place. But it was definitely a movie that I saw many times and saw many times on the Disney Channel and on VHS. I'm sure I don't know if we owned it, but it was around. And I still love it. I also forgot about all the music, but I don't know how that all left my brain. I remembered Powerline, but all the rest of it gone.
Yeah.
Just gone. Probably because of all the other space filled up by Lion King songs.
Mm.
And probably some by Color of the Wind. And then Mulan songs. Because some of the other ones just like, and then all of the space filled up by Phil Collins Tarzan songs. Because my mom like listened to that like for like 3 months on the way to school, and I'm like,
I've never
Tarzan
seen that movie
again. It's good.
Wow.
The beginning's a little rough, man. Like a jaguar straight up like steals a gorilla baby. Like,
well.
yeah, it's rough. But anyway, not a jaguar, a leopard. But I love this movie. I will watch it again. I look forward to showing it to my daughter. I don't think she's quite ready for it yet because it's pretty, junior high-ish kind of movie. But once she understands what school is a little bit more, I think she'll get a kick out of it.
I think 8 or 9 is the sweet spot where you don't know what high school is yet, other than it's this cool place older kids go to.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
agree
when I
with
would
that.
introduce it.
Yeah. I think I don't know if she's there yet, but I do look forward to showing it to her. I think she'll like it, but we'll see.
All right. Well, Garsh, that's our episode. If you want to find us, you can find us at Popcorn Psychology at Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Popcorn_psych and Twitter, popcornpsychology@gmail.com if you'd like to email us. We also have a Patreon and a TeePublic if you want to get some merch from us, or if you would like to support us as a patron. We always appreciate that. And as always, if you can always rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, it is the best way for other people to find us who don't know us yet. And we really appreciate it. And we read your reviews and we love them. So yeah, have a goofy day, everybody.